Hey guys, welcome to Ring Steel TV. Today is episode 3 in our $500 1,000 yard steel elk challenge. Stay tuned. Hey guys, I know last week I told you that we would be installing the scope base, the rings, the Picatinny rail, the muzzle brake, and those items. And as I sat down to edit the video, it was clear that this was going to be entirely too long. So what I've chosen to do is break this down into manageable episodes, around 20 minutes. This week we'll be focusing on installing the scope base, and we'll be bedding that to the receiver so you guys can see that entire process. So anyway, I wanted to explain that. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let's get on with the build. Okay guys, next up we're going to be installing our scope, but before we install our scope, we're going to take a look at these scope bases right here. So on this TC Compass, you can see it comes with 2 individual scope bases. I actually like a single scope rail, and the reason for that are these screw holes could be screwed in just a little bit cockeyed or not exactly level, so these could be out of alignment this way, can also be out of alignment this way around the top of the receiver. So for these reasons, I actually like to put a single rail on top of the scope. The other thing is it'll give us more flexibility with moving the scope rings forward or back as we need to adjust the scope. On this particular one, you could see you could only mount the scope in these 2 positions here, or the rings in these 2 positions here, which will limit the amount of scope travel you have forward and back. So let's take a look at the scope rail that we selected and talk about the installation. I'll be right back. So guys, here you can see what we selected. This is an EGW scope base. This is for the TC Compass. This is also for the long action rifle that we're running with the 300 Win Mag. Inside the package, you can see that this comes with the scope rail itself. Nicely machined scope rail. And then also some accessories here. This will be the screws. They've included 5 screws in case one gets galled up or something like that, and also this was a nice addition, a Torx head, a T10, to be able to screw these in if you don't have one. To install this scope bed, we'll need some JB Weld I've got here, some Q-tips, some cleaning cloths here, just some regular old cleaning cloths I like to use, and then some isopropyl alcohol. And then I also have a little piece of paper here, and we'll talk about measuring how much gap there is on the scope base. Just from a price perspective, this EGW cost me $47.74 at the time that I purchased this. And then the JB Weld, which is the other thing that will be permanent to this, was $5.02, and I believe that was got at Walmart. So let's install. Guys, the first thing we're going to want to do here is remove these 2 scope bases that came with the gun. So I'm taking those 2 off now. Next up, we're going to want to clean this surface here and degrease it and get any oils that we have off of it. So we'll use a little bit of this isopropyl alcohol. Okay, now we've got a good clean surface here to attach the scope rail to. So guys, the next thing we're going to want to do is take our scope rail, and you can see here it shows that this goes to the front. The front of our gun is this way here. It's important that you get this in the right orientation because the distance from this end to this end is actually a little bit thicker, and I'll show that to you now. 20 MOA scope rail basically means this end is a little shorter and this end's a little taller, and it's actually pointing the scope down a little bit. That way the front of the barrel raises up for your longer shots. So if we look at the back of this, that is 0.280. And on the front, we are reading 0.240. So first thing we want to do when we have this on the gun is we're going to actually screw this in, and I'm going to start with the back here and put a couple screws in it. We'll use this little 10T adapter that EGW was kind enough to send with the package. You can see I've not put any screws on the front yet, and the reason for that is I want to kind of check the gap here. When we install this, and the reason why we're bedding this rail is there's going to be a little gap here in the front, or potentially in the front, which will be right in this little section here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the paper through there and just see how much of a gap it is. And I can feel a little bit of resistance as it goes in. So it's pretty close, but you can see there is a gap. And we actually want to take up that gap that's in here with the bedding material. That way the gun doesn't have a tendency, when we screw this down, this will actually push down against the top of the receiver and cause this rail to be out of alignment. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these same two screws and I'm going to move them to the front of the gun. And I'm going to screw them down here. One thing I want to notice here is if you look at this screw, it's tapered there at the base of the screw head, and the EGW rail is tapered inside the screw holes. So this will lock into place and not have a tendency to move around under recoil, which is a nice feature of the EGW rail. Okay, and now we'll measure the back. Now that we've got the screws here, we'll measure the back, sticking a piece of paper in. There's a little bit of resistance, but not nearly as much. In fact, I think I could probably fold this paper over and get two pieces in there, as you can see, and that still is more gap than we had on the front when these were on the front. So what we're doing is we're looking for a side of the rail that has more gap. And if we push this down, I don't know if you guys can see it, but you can see that that's actually moving up and down as I push this. So the idea is we're going to put a thin piece of epoxy JB Weld through the base of this deal here, and that's going to take up this gap and allow this to sit as level and as straight as possible without the rail being under any stress. When you have stresses in this rail, the scope rings will get out of alignment. Every time you fire the weapon, it could put the scope in a different spot and cause your groups to open up. So that's what we're trying to eliminate at this point. So let's get this taken off and start on the next step. Okay guys, the next step to bedding this rail on this gun is to put a release agent on here. And I forgot to mention earlier, we're going to need some type of release agent, a wax. I'm just going to use this black Kiwi shoe polish, and we'll just kind of spread it on the top of this deal and put it everywhere we do not want the epoxy to grab hold of. Okay, so we've got some here on the finger. We'll just put it everywhere we don't want it to go. I like to go on the front of this here and just be very liberal with this. You want to get it down into these holes on the sides, anywhere you do not want the JB Weld to stick. And believe me, if you don't do this, it will stick. And finally, I want to make sure we've got a lot going down into the screw holes. We don't want any wax to stick to those threads there. Next thing I'm going to do is take a Q-tip. I just like to cut the head off of it here with some scissors. And then what we'll do is we'll just kind of pack the hole a little bit with the shoe polish and ensure it's in the threads real good. And then I'll go back and I'll add some more shoe polish down into those holes. All right, there we are. We've got plenty of release agent on that, and we'll move on to the next step. So the next thing we're going to do is prep the rail for installation. Here's our rail. We want to give it a good cleaning on the base. Again, just using a little isopropyl alcohol, scrubbing it down real good. We'll take a look at the orientation of these screw holes. That way we know which way this thing goes on, because we're going to put a layer of JB Weld here across the face of this deal. So you can see that these two screw holes that are closest to the front actually go to the front, and then these two that have this long distance on the back, this is how we'll know as we put it back on the gun which side's the front and back. If you ever get confused, you can just measure the distance of the front and the back on these 20 MOA rails, and whichever one is the shortest distance from the top to the bottom will be going to the front of the gun. All right, now that we've cleaned this, we're going to take a little bit of sandpaper. I've just got this little deal of sandpaper, and I like to rough these up to give the JB Weld something to stick to. I want to use something like maybe an 80 or 100 grit. It doesn't really matter as long as you get it roughed up. Okay, there we go. It's all roughed up, and then I'll go back over it one more time with some cleaning. We don't want any oils or waxes or anything like that on this rail. Okay, that rail is prepped and ready to go. Let's move on to the next step. Guys, one more thing I forgot to mention that we want to do here is we actually want to fill these holes here at the top with some more of this kiwi paste wax. We just want to ensure that the screws don't stick in there. For some reason the epoxy makes its way up into this, and don't worry about how this looks, just kind of get it in there and ensure that you've got some wax in those holes. Okay, there we go. Okay, so next up is our JB Weld. We'll go ahead and get it out of the package. What you want to do is you want to use enough of this to cover the entire bottom of this rail with a thin layer. So don't feel like you need to skimp on this. It's better that you have a lot of extra than not enough. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take this JB Weld, and this gets mixed equal parts. Now what I like to do is just take another Q-tip and cut off the end of it. And then we'll use that to mix these two together. All right. Now that that is mixed up, we're going to flip our rail over, and we're going to apply it to the base of this rail. We're going to try not to get it on the sides of the rail and just get it right on top. Also want to try not to get it down into the screw holes. Okay, that should be enough there. I'm going to take another Q-tip and use it to smooth it out. And get a nice even coat. Okay, we've got a good even coat across that. Let's put this to the side and bring our gun back. We've got our rifle back here on the bench. We're getting ready to put our rail on top of it. We're going to grab 4 of our screws from EGW to mount the scope base on. And the last thing I want to do here is I just want to put a little wax on these screws so that they don't get stuck. We'll just get a little bit there. Put it on the threads. Okay, so now our screws are coated with the JB Weld. Our Picatinny rail has been coated with the JB Weld also. And if you remember from our last one, the screw, the hole that's on the front needs to go to there, and then the screw hole that's got the distance to the back will go to the back of the gun. And we'll just flip this over and we'll line up the holes the best we can. And now what we'll do is we'll take our screw, and we'll start with this one right here, and we'll get it down in there. And then I'll put one screw in the front, and lastly we'll put a screw in these two back ones. And these two back ones, guys, you don't want to put them down real hard. You just want to kind of get them in there to keep this in line. So we're just laying those two down until they bottom out, but just very lightly. We don't want to torque the two back ones down. On the front, I'm going to go ahead and bring these down a little bit tighter, but not fully torqued. All right, there we go. And the two back ones are just barely resting down in the hole. All right, that's good. Now what I want to do is take some Q-tips, and we're going to go around. You'll see around the outside there, the epoxy is coming out. We want to clean up all that epoxy. So I'll start here. And we'll just clean all that up. We definitely don't want that going up into the action. All right, and the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little paper towel and some isopropyl alcohol, and we'll clean off the remainder of this. The last thing I'm going to do is take cleaning patch, and we're going to go around it one more time. Make sure we're down in all the crevices and this thing is fully clean. And I got a couple little spots here at the top I want to sort out. I'm just putting a little isopropyl alcohol on the end of the Q-tip. And I'm just going to rub this off here. Okay, we'll get one last look. Ensure that we've covered all our bases. That looks really good there. Looks really good there, nice and clean. Here in the front looks good. And also on the back here. Let's see if I can bring it on the side. So that's it. That scope base is now bedded to the rifle. We're going to let this sit for 24 hours. Okay guys, we're back here at the bench. It's been 24 hours since we installed the Picatinny rail. What I'm going to do now is just remove these screws. Okay, so we've removed the screws. The first thing I want to do is I want to take these screws, I've got them here, and they've got a bunch of wax on them. So what we'll do is we'll just take a little piece of paper here and clean off the threads on all of these. And get these screws wax free and just as clean as we can. So I'll go ahead and clean all 4 of those up. Okay, so with all the screw threads cleaned up, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use some Q-tips here and our isopropyl alcohol. And what we'll do is we'll just clean out each of these screw holes of the wax that we put in there. Okay, so with the screw holes all cleaned out, what we're going to do now is we're going to install them. These need to go to 20 inch pounds, I'm sorry, not foot pounds. So we'll use our Wheeler fat wrench here to get us to 20 pounds. And before I install each of these, I'll just apply a little bit of blue Loctite to them. This blue Loctite's removable, and it's also going to keep us from vibrating loose under recoil. And then we'll start with the 2 inside ones. Then we'll move to the 2 outside ones. Okay, those are all Loctited down. Now what we'll do is we'll just clean off the rest of the rail. I have here my old toothbrush I used to clean bolts and whatnot. I'm just putting a little bit of product on it now. And we're gonna take that, it's just bore solvent, regular old gun cleaning fluid. And I'm gonna just scrub this down real good. Okay, so now we have the rail cleaned. One thing I wanted to point out here, you guys notice that on many of the videos you're going to see online, they're actually going to remove this rail from the receiver. We can remove it, that's not an issue, but since I don't need to remove it, I'm going to go ahead and leave it on there. There is some surface tension between the epoxy and the rail and the bedding that's actually going to also help hold this together. When the day comes, if I ever need to remove this rail, I'll just remove those screws, give it just a little whack, and it'll pop right off. So there's really no need to remove this at all. And guys, I would encourage you guys to just go ahead and leave it on there. There's really no reason to remove it. So anyway, guys, that's our bed on our Picatinny rail, and we'll move on to the next step. Hey guys, I hope you really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed installing the scope base on the receiver. I hope you guys got a lot out of this video. If you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe below. If you have any comments, also leave those below. I'm always open to answering any questions, or if you saw something wrong that I did, let me know that. So anyway, until next time, thanks for watching.